Northern Kentucky History Hour is a project of Behringer-Crawford Museum, Northern Kentucky's history museum, that would not be possible without support. Thank you to all of our sponsors, including the City of Covington, Kenton County Fiscal Court, Arts Wave, Kentucky Arts Council, Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, the Carol Ann and Ralphie Hale Jr. Foundation, and our members. If you are not yet a member of the museum, please consider joining for access to discounts and exclusive programming. You can learn more and join at bcmuseum.org. We would love to hear from our viewers tonight. So if you have a question or comment to share, please type it in the chat or the Q&A feature, and I will be sure to get to those at the end of the presentation. So let's meet tonight's presenter. Amy graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1997 and served 20 years as a Marine Corps officer. She served as an FA-18 Weapons Systems Officer, backseater, and an FA-18 pilot, completed 3 combat deployments, and flew 89 combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2002, Amy became the first woman in the Marine Corps to fly a combat mission in an FA-18. She has also deployed to numerous countries around the world, flying in Japan, South Korea, Australia, and various countries in the Middle East. After her operational flying tours, Amy served as a congressional fellow, advising a senior member of the U.S. House of Representatives Armed Services Committee on Defense and Foreign Policy. Subsequently, she served in the Pentagon as Marine Corps liaison to the State Department and other federal agencies. She earned a master's degree in international security from Johns Hopkins University, and she is a graduate of the Center for the Study of Weapons of Mass Destruction's program for emerging leaders at the National Defense University. Her final assignment was as a senior instructor in the political science department at the U.S. Naval Academy before retiring at the rank of lieutenant colonel and moving back home to Kentucky to raise her family. There, she served as a Democratic nominee for the U.S. House and Senate in 2018 and 2020. She is the author of the book titled Honor Bound, An American Story of Dreams and Service. It's a memoir of her time in the military, what propelled her to run for office, and the hard lessons in leadership, sacrifice, and patriotism she's learned along the way. In 2022, President Biden appointed Amy to be a member of the U.S. Naval Academy's Board of Visitors. Amy also serves on the boards of IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and the Plowshares Fund, and is a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Whew. Hopefully I got that right. Thank you so much, Amy. It's quite a bio. Now, before we get started, we have a quiz question tonight. The first respondent to enter a correct answer in the chat on Zoom or Facebook Live will win a Northern Kentucky History Hour prize, and most importantly, bragging rights. So tonight's question is, although women were formerly allowed to serve in the military beginning in 1948, in what year was the ban lifted to allow them to serve in direct ground combat roles? So go ahead and get those answers in the chat. And Amy, if you are ready, I'm going to turn it over to you and we can go ahead and get started and not listen to my dogs. Sorry about that.
No, it's great to be with you all. And can you hear me okay? All right, awesome. Well, I will go ahead and share my screen and pull up a slide presentation. But before I do, I just want to say this is awesome what you all do here with Northern Kentucky History. My father was a huge history buff, and my brother taught history at Notre Dame Academy, and he still teaches history today. So they would, you know, my dad especially, was unfortunately no longer with us, would have been all over this program, and he absolutely loved Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, of course, history. So, all right, let me see, share, and here we go. All right. Slideshow. Yay. Okay, I can still do some of this stuff. All right. So I'll just tell you, I'm Northern Kentuckian, born and bred. I love growing up here. I grew up in Edgewood. My mother was a pediatrician at Children's Hospital in Cincinnati. And my father taught high school across the river at Roger Bacon High School in Cincinnati. My dad grew up in Campbell County in Fort Thomas. My mother and her family moved to Fort Thomas when she was a senior in high school, and that's where they met. The two of them went to St. Thomas High School there, and they met in high school, and then Dad went off to the seminary, and Mom went to what became Thomas More. Dad did a year in the seminary, and then decided that wasn't for him, which is probably good for me. He left and went to Thomas More, and they sort of reconnected there. And I am the youngest of three children. My sister Jane is 4 years older than me. She went on to go to Notre Dame Academy and stayed here in Northern Kentucky, became a lawyer, prosecutor in Boone County and Campbell County. And my brother Matt, who's 2 years older than me, he went to Northern Kentucky University and then went into education at Xavier and then became a teacher. So for me, I you know, again, I loved growing up here. I was a bit of a tomboy, played all kinds of sports in high school, baseball, or softball, basketball, soccer, and left at the age of I just turned 18 for the Naval Academy. It was something I had always wanted to do. I wanted to fly jets at a very young age. I remember being 11 years old or so and seeing a History Channel documentary with these jets flying on the backs of aircraft carriers and thinking to myself, that's what I want to do. And it was at that time when women could not fly in the military. We couldn't fly fighter jets, and there was a federal law prohibiting us from doing that. So that's when I wrote every single member of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees, asking them to change the law. And I got several letters back. I got no letters back from my senator, who was Mitch McConnell back then. And I got several letters back, one from my own representative here in this district. His name was Jim Bunning. And he wrote me back and basically said, I'm not going to change the law, go do something else. And I still have that letter today. But I got several letters back that said, "Hey, you should be able to do this job. If you're good enough, you should be able to compete." And so that was my first understanding a little bit of politics, which I kind of didn't really think about before then. And I was sort of a one-issue person, and that was my issue. And then I got lucky because in 1992, I was a senior in high school. And we had this amazing thing happen called an election. We had more women elected to Congress than ever before in history that year. And we had a new administration. And that new administration opened up some of the doors to women in the military, not all of them, but the doors that I wanted opened, which was fighter jets specifically, were open to me. So in early graduated from Notre Dame in 1993. And a month later, I left home to go to the Naval Academy. And I ended up doing 4 years at the Naval Academy, majoring in political science, which was really a focus on international relations, and graduated from there and became a United States Marine Corps officer. If you don't know, about a third, maybe slightly less than a third, I'm not quite sure the numbers today, of the officers that graduate from the Naval Academy become United States Marines. So that was the path that I chose. Why? Marines are the best, they were the most elite, and that really time I went toughest, most elite I could get into. And so from there, I went to Marine Corps training, and then went to flight school down in Pensacola, 2 years down there. and then selected F-18s. F-18s was the best of the best at the time. It was absolutely the best fighter jet that we had at that time. And I absolutely was thrilled to get that assignment. Went to San Diego, learned how to fly the F-18. I had not so great eyes initially, and so I had to be a backseater. If you know a little bit about Top Gun, I started out as kind of like Goose in the backseat doing weapon systems, communications, radar, all of that stuff, targeting. It was very, very intense at that time. And right after I got out of the training squadron, no kidding, like 4 months later, we had 9/11 happen. San Diego stationed, and I'll never forget the morning of 9/11. They basically shut the gates down on the base, and I happened to live close to the base, so I was one of the first people on the base to be able to respond. But they'd shut the gates down, so a lot of the older, more experienced aviators could not get onto the base to get into the jets. So that my commanding officer basically had to put me, who was somebody who didn't have a whole lot of experience, in the jet with live air-to-air missiles, both radar guided and heat-seeking missiles. And the idea there was I stood on the runway waiting for the call to launch to potentially shoot down an airliner going into Los Angeles or San Diego. Of course, no airliners were going into those cities, but we didn't know that back then. This was like right after the World Trade Center had fallen. So it was a very intense day. Within a week or two, we had deployed. I mean, we were gone. We left to the Middle East, and I did deployment after deployment after deployment. That was in my mid-20s, to Afghanistan and then to Iraq in 2003. This pictures that you see up here on the screen, the one on the bottom left is from myself in Afghanistan. And the one on the bottom right is me flying over Iraq after a mission there. The top left is myself and my father, who was super proud. He was did not serve in the military himself, but he was like the super Marine Corps dad, and he was awesome. And then you see my parents in the middle when I was a midshipman there at the Naval Academy. And then on the right, top right, is my family when I was in my flying days. That's my brother Matt and my sister Jane. And then down there in the middle is that was the Secretary of Defense at the time, Donald Rumsfeld. He came out to Afghanistan to give us, give all of the Marines sort of an attaboy that we were out there at the time. So I got to meet him. Very interesting, very intense flying, and lived in tents. Was really sort of Afghanistan flying was a lot. It was boring at times, but there was a lot of very intense moments. The Iraq tour was constantly really hard and a lot of really intense flying. We never came back with ordnance, so meaning that pretty much every mission we were destroying something, enemy forces or something that the folks on the ground needed us to get rid of. So it was extremely intense time. After that, I went to I got my eyes fixed. And so I was able to apply to be a front seater, and the Marine Corps said, sure. And so that was fantastic for me. I went back to flight school again as a kind of a higher ranking student, which was really fun and interesting. And it was kind of like, imagine going back to high school again, having all the knowledge that you have. I mean, how much fun would that be? Just go back and do the fun stuff. And so that's what it was. It was like a year and a half, 2 years of learning how to fly, but I knew all the book stuff, and I was the same rank as all my instructors. So it was really easy. I took up golf and learned kayaking and did all kinds of fun stuff in that 2-year tour. And it was really I think I needed that after the intensity of the combat tours. I had a dog at the time. I trained him to be a therapy dog. It was more of therapy for myself, I think. And I really enjoyed those 2 years. I met my husband during that time. He was one of my instructors, which was a bit scandalous at the time, but we dated while we were out of the same squadron. So it was, we did nothing wrong, but we got to know each other there and ended up marrying later on. But that was the time frame that was really wonderful. That was in South Texas in Corpus Christi, and then from there, I went to back to San Diego for a second tour. This time as a pilot. Really cool. You'll see the pictures here in this slide. This is the top left. That's me doing carrier coach, Virginia Beach. I did a year there, flying onto the backs of aircraft carriers. It's always my dream. Amazing. One of the hardest things I ever did was that, especially night carrier quals. And I got to fly all over the country and the world as an F-18 pilot this time. Went into places like Guam, Australia, Japan, South Korea, all around the Pacific, and then did another tour into Afghanistan, this time in Helmand Province, which is down in the south. And interestingly, my husband and I, we got married in 2009, and there you can see some wedding photos there. We got married at St. Agnes Church in right up the road from where I live now, and that's the top left. And we had our reception there at the Dries Pavilion, which overlooks, as you all know, overlooks Cincinnati. It was really amazing. But the interesting thing about that wedding is, we got married in 2009 in December. And about a week later, Eric left for Afghanistan. So we didn't have much of a honeymoon. My husband had to go to Afghanistan. And then I left about 2 months after Eric did for my tour in Afghanistan. So Eric was stationed in Kabul. I was stationed in Helmand Province. The bottom left picture that you see is Eric and I when I flew up there to Kabul to do some liaison work for the unit that I was with. I got a chance to see Eric. So we always say, we had a honeymoon in Afghanistan, which is, not exactly a real honeymoon. So we got through that tour though, and moved to Washington, D.C. And the top right, you can see the Pentagon. That's where I was stationed for the next few years. I did a tour in that time frame on Capitol Hill as a congressional fellow. So the Marine Corps sends 10 or 12 officers and some enlisted, senior enlisted, to Capitol Hill to work on the various staffs of members of Congress that are on the Armed Services Committees. So that was really interesting to me. It certainly opened up my eyes to politics. And I was literally coming from the battlefield in Afghanistan to that assignment. So I think that year was 2010. I'm sorry, that year was 2011. I provided I hope to the members of Congress at that time, coming right from the battlefield. So, and then that picture there is just a fun picture of me flying over Mount Everest or Denali in Alaska. So I did get to fly all around the country and all world, and that was great, great time. After my congressional fellowship tour, I did a tour Pentagon as a Marine Corps liaison to all the other government agencies, and that was also amazing. Working with the State Department, working with USAID, DHS to some degree, CIA from an operational perspective. So really having an understanding of what those agencies do and making sure that the Marine Corps, the military was integrated into what they were doing. Sometimes when you have this huge bureaucracy of the US government, a lot of times the left hand doesn't always know what the right hand's doing. So the goal there was to make sure that we had connected and knew how we could all achieve the same goals and objectives and make sure that we were being efficient. So that was a really interesting tour in the Pentagon. And from there, I went to the Naval Academy, back to the Naval Academy to teach. And the reason kind of was, that was kind of a road, a path split in my career, because I wanted to have children. And I remember, after having my first child, the Marine Corps kind of wanted me to go back to the cockpit, and I wanted another kid. And so that doesn't always work, right? And so I kind of had to make a decision there. I look back on my Marine Corps career now, and I absolutely loved being a Marine. They were very upfront with me in terms of, okay, you select this and you're not going to make general. Okay, that's kind of what I did. And I had 2 other children after that. Teaching at Annapolis, I taught national security. I taught U.S. government, constitutional development, a weapons of mass destruction course which is basically national security course. So it was, and leadership there. So it was a really great tour. After that tour, I decided that the events of 2016 and the election, that cycle that year, I was teaching Naval Academy. I was teaching midshipmen about honor and courage and leadership. And I was in politics. And it was really hard for me to square the leaders that were rising in our country that year and the things that the Naval Academy instilled in me and that I truly believe in, things like honor and integrity. And so I really felt like our country was not going in the 2016 election. And I really felt like I had always been that my goal in life, my job, was to protect our country. And so the best way for me to do that was to be the leader that I wanted to see in politics. And so I decided to retire at 20, and my husband retired as well, right at the 20-year mark, and moved back because that was a place that I know. And it was a place where I felt like I could make a difference. And I wanted to be near my family. I had been gone. All right,
I apologize. Seems like we're having some technical difficulties. And we've lost Amy for a second, so I'm hoping we can get her back.
So from there, I decided, hey, I've got to do something, and I got to move back to Kentucky and see what I can do to help our country, and to be the kind of political leader that I always wanted to vote for myself. And so I went back we moved to Georgetown. And my husband had a really great opportunity down there, business opportunity. So that's where we settled. And I launched the congressional campaign, which is awesome. It was really invigorating. We fired up a lot of people. I think it was really important. I was part of a wave of veterans in 2018 who felt, as I did, that we needed to stand up and be a voice of reason in our country. So even though we didn't win that race, we moved that district further than any other district in the country that year, which is really awesome. And we were part of a larger wave, which in my opinion was really important for making sure that the government was balanced that year in 2018. And then after that, I decided to take that sort of momentum and run for Senate McConnell in 20. This was a guy, in my opinion, that really had done some not so great things for our country, and I felt like it was time. So we were excited about that campaign. We fired up a lot of people around the country, and I think we got people energized here in Kentucky to a large degree. We were not successful in that campaign. COVID hit, and it's very difficult to go up against an incumbent that's been around for like 30 years. But we have a huge difference for the country. And so I was really proud of everybody that worked on that campaign. And when I didn't get out of politics, and what I still do today is I have a couple, I'll come back to that, but I have a couple of work on a very simple message of country over party. I've never been a partisan person. And I felt like we needed people that kind of stood up for basic American principles. So that's what I do today, work on fundraising mostly to support candidates around the country, particularly women who have served the country. That's that middle pack honor bound. Last cycle, I worked on Secretary of State races to make sure that people just who get into that office are people who with integrity, who are going to count the votes. Seems pretty basic, right? But that's what we had to work on last cycle. So, and then Democratic majority action. That's what I work on this cycle, and it's a national security focused message to voters. Okay. And the other thing that I work on is the family, right? I mean, I wrote a book, as you mentioned earlier in the start of this, which was a project that I started a long time ago, and it's a biography basically, and an autobiography to this point. And that was amazing, just because it reminded me so much of why this is all matters, right? It's a top picture is my family, my extended family, my sister and her kids, my brother and his daughter and his wife, and everybody. So that's kind of why we do what we do. And the bottom is my family in front of our house, and the kids, and being there for them right now as their soccer coach or baseball or whatever. That's kind of where I'm at. And with that, I want to turn for whatever questions that you have. How about that?
Thank you so much, Amy. And thank you so much for everyone, and for figuring out how to stick with the presentation after all the technical glitches and whatnot. You're doing a great job. So let's go ahead. We still have not had a correct answer for the trivia question.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to try to, that's still up for grabs. So I'm going to give everybody a little bit more time on that one. I'm going to read it.
Well, I can give a hint too if you want.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
So when I talked about opening up some jobs, right? President Clinton opened up some jobs to women. Some ships, combat aircraft. But it wasn't until later, many years later, that all jobs were opened up to women, including what are called ground combat jobs, to drive a tank, to be in the infantry. So that's what the question is getting at. When were all jobs open to women in the military? And it's fairly recent.
Okay. Heather, you want to go ahead and start with what kind of questions or comments we might have? And I want to remind everyone to put your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to those.
Yeah, so our first question is that they said when they think of the Naval Academy, they think of it as training sailors. So I'm assuming what they're referring to here is that like you trained in like aircraft flying and stuff. And they said, how does that work?
Right. So the Naval Academy, if you go to the Naval Academy, when you graduate, you can be a surface warfare officer, like a ship driver, right? Sailors. Okay, that makes sense. You can also be in submarines underwater, right? You can be a pilot. The Navy has, it's like the third largest air force in the world, right? And they're fly on aircraft carriers. The Air Force does not fly on aircraft carriers. The Navy flies on aircraft carriers. So that's a lot of jets. And so you can become a naval aviator. You can become a Navy SEAL. You can go into cryptology. You can go into, diving, like mine, underwater diving, that kind of stuff. There's lots of things you can do in the Navy. There's also the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps is a pretty big service. And we also have our own aviation element with the Marine Corps. And so there's lots of things you can do there too. But the Naval Academy trains officers that do all of that stuff.
And we have another question that I believe the answer is no to, but they said, is there anything today that women can't do in the military? And I believe, based on your
Yeah, that's right. There's nothing that women can't do if you're qualified, which is just amazing, because that was what so many of us, wanted from the time like I was 10, 11 years old. That's all I ever wanted. And actually I worked my whole career to make that possible. There were always restrictions, even during my career. During my career, I could fly a fighter jet, but I could not drive a tank. Think about that. There's just weird restrictions like that. And it didn't make sense. Now, everything is open. So if you qualify, you can hop in a jet, you can drive a tank, you could be in the artillery, you could be an Army Ranger, you could be a Navy SEAL, but you got to qualify. And some of those jobs are really, really hard.
I don't know if you just saw it, Heather, but I think we have a winner for the trivia.
Ew, Sarah M.
Congratulations to Sarah M. The answer was 2013, correct, Amy?
Yeah, it was during the Obama administration, his second administration, and he decided to open up all jobs. So I was very, very proud that happened that day.
And I did just see on Facebook that Pete Heiss said, Amy, as a retired Marine Master Gunnery Sergeant and a Vietnam veteran, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Well, thank you for yours. Really appreciate that.
All right, Heather, we can get back to, we had another.
Yeah, so Sarah, who also said before she got the trivia question, but she said, hello, Amy. I actually met you in 2019 at Lead Kentucky Annual Leadership Summit. Thank you for your service and everything you currently do to support and encourage women leaders. I also have a calling to leadership, but not on a political platform. What is the advice you can provide emerging women leaders who struggle to have a voice with climbing the corporate ladder that have very little female representation in leadership and executive roles?
Wow. So one, I think the biggest thing with women, and myself is included in this, is you have more experience than you think you do. You are ready. If you want to run for office, you're ready. If you believe that, I feel like the biggest advice is don't be afraid. And don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid to jump in. Don't be afraid to speak up, because your voice is really powerful and valued. It should be valued. And sometimes you got to force your way in. But I think the biggest thing with women is sometimes we feel like we have to get more qualifications, right? We have to be uber qualified before we can take on that role. Whereas a lot of men, they're like, whatever, I don't need that. I'm just going to jump in. And I feel like, we should just, we're lifelong learners, continue to get the qualifications you can, but jump in and just try it. Sometimes the best experience is going and just doing. I'm a doer. I'm somebody that just goes and does it, and I figure out a path, and then I just go do it. And I feel like that's the best advice.
We also had Donna said, thank you so much. What an amazing life. She wants to know where you live now. I guess she wants to know, you're in Northern Kentucky, right?
I am. So a couple of years ago, we moved back up here to be closer to my mom and to my family up here. So I guess my husband's positions had changed, and so he was back to flying again, and so that allows us to kind of move wherever we want, which is great. So I miss Central Kentucky quite a bit, but I love Northern Kentucky too. So we're in Fort Mitchell, and we love it here.
Wonderful. And I wanted to ask you, I know you're a Northern Kentucky girl. I'm a fellow Northern Kentucky girl. I'm actually a fellow Notre Dame Academy alum. What do you think makes Northern Kentucky so great, or what do you love so much about Northern Kentucky?
I'm going to go outside and see if I can get a better, is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Sorry about that being outside here. We're just going to talk. What I love about Northern Kentucky is my father, he loved history and he loved this area. And so when I was little, he was a teacher. My mother worked during the summer, but my father did not. And he would take us everywhere around Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, and like every single historical marker you could possibly imagine. And like, we learned it all. And I loved it. I actually loved it. And so I think for me, what I love about Northern Kentucky is just the history, because of Dad, but also there's something about Northern Kentucky where you're a part of Cincinnati and you love Cincinnati and you're like, love the Bengals and you love the Reds and all of that. But you have this pride about being a Kentuckian. And my dad had that. He loved Cincinnati, but he was a Kentuckian, and he instilled that in me. And I think that's what I love about Northern Kentucky is this pride of being a Kentuckian. When I was growing up, you know, we watched the Kentucky Derby. That was like our thing as a family. And my dad would make us stand up during my old Kentucky home. He didn't make us stand up during the national anthem. He made us stand up during my old Kentucky home. And so, you know, just, yes, you're kind of a metropolitan area of Cincinnati, but you're really a Kentuckian, damn it. And that's what I love about this area.
And I love that you mentioned earlier that in this area, we always love to ask people where they went to school, and we mean high school, not college. When we ask.
That's right. That's right. We tend to care about high school more than college in this area, but a couple fun facts that really only Kentuckians would possibly care about, or Northern Kentuckians would care about. I was on the first girls soccer team that went to the state championships in Kentucky. The first high school girls soccer state championships was in 1992, and Notre Dame got to the championship game, and I was really proud of that. Now we did not win the game, but I always say that sort of was my famous thing of being on that team, to be in the first ever girls soccer championship in the state.
Definitely go Pandas.
That's right.
So I do have we have a question. Someone wanted to know, were you ever able to fly with the Blue Angels?
No, but I know lots of people who are. So the Blue Angels are the flight demonstration squadron for the Navy and the Marine Corps, and they do a very specific role. They usually they always come from the combat flying forces, but their job is really to fly jets in air shows. They fly jets that are kind of stripped down, don't have the same equipment as the combat jets that you would fly overseas. That was not a role that I really aspired to. I was mostly an operational type of person, but they do great work. So.
All right. And I just want to know what's next for Amy McGrath.
I'm really just looking a day out at this point. Just sort of getting through the summer. I work, like I said, behind the scenes in my PACs, and I teach at the University of Kentucky Patterson School. So I teach national security policy down there. And I'm on several boards, national, federal, and state, and nonprofit. But I'm really just enjoying the time as much as I can with the family at this point.
If anyone's interested, which I'm sure they are, in purchasing your book, how would they do that? I wanted to make sure I give you a plug for your book.
Well, yeah, no, you can go on Amazon. You can pretty much get anything on Amazon these days. It's published by Knopf, and it came out a few years ago. It's called Honor Bound. And it was a great project. It took me over a year to do. I encourage everybody to write their memoir. Do it. There's ways to do it. My mom did it, and she did it, just writing once a week. So it's just something that you should have for your kids. And this was kind of mine, and it goes over a lot of my combat tours and experiences in the military and then in politics.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. I think that's about all the questions that we have right now. Is that correct, Heather?
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And, being a Northern Kentucky girl, you're very inspirational to a lot of women, a lot of what you've accomplished. So thank you so much.
Is there a way that if anyone wants to contact you in the future that we can send an email, put an email in the chat or something?
Sure. It's info @amymcgrath.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And I have a great team that still works behind the scenes and on the PACs, and they'll get a hold of me.
For more Northern Kentucky history throughout the week, check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, where you can find the latest Curators Chat, along with all of our past Northern Kentucky History Hour presentations. Please like and subscribe. That's all we have time for this evening. Thank you again to all of our sponsors and supporters of BCM. Until next time, take care, everyone, and good night. Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, Heather. Have a great night.
All right. Great night. Bye now.